I guess we can get started. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining us today. We're excited to dive into the early release of our React Native SDK. So, whether you're building for retail, campuses, or any indoor space, we think you're going to love how easy it is to get started and create rich, interactive maps on mobile. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Kim, and I'm a senior dev evangelist here at Mappedin, and I'll be walking you through the presentation and our live demo for today.
Hi everyone, my name is Mark Sohm. I'm also a developer evangelist here at Mappedin, helping developers outside the company build some cool apps and integrations with our technology. Work on the developer site, so hopefully the guides that I've created there will be helpful to you as you walk along your developer journey. My role here today will be manning the Q&A, so feel free to drop any questions while Kim's presenting, and I'll take care of answering those while the session is going on, and we'll also have a Q&A near the end as well. Over to you, Kim.
Thanks, Mark. All right, so here's what we've got lined up for today. We'll start with who this webinar is for, and then we'll walk through how it fits into the bigger Mappedin platform. After that, we'll dive into the SDK capabilities for React Native. Then we'll jump into a live demo with me, where I'll go over on how to set up your environments, a little bit of live coding, and showcase some other features that we don't get to see in the demo, so you get to see what everything looks like. Then we'll wrap up with developer resources, and Mark will address your questions during the Q&A. Some housekeeping notes for today. This webinar is being recorded, so you can expect it in your inbox early next week, so don't worry if you missed anything. Q&A is also open throughout the presentation and demo, so as things go along, don't be shy and ask your questions there. With that, let's get started. Starting off with who would benefit from this webinar. So obviously, if you're already a React Native developer, you'll find this SDK quite intuitive. If you or your team are working on cross-platform apps and want a consistent mapping experience across iOS, Android, and web, well, this SDK is for you. It's also great for teams building rapid prototypes, marketers pitching solutions, or property owners exploring digital wayfinding. We've designed the SDK to be intuitive and flexible for all kinds of use cases, and of course, we'll show you how very shortly. Before we jump into the SDK, it's worth touching on how fast and easy it is to make your maps. With Mappedin's AI-powered tools, you can now generate indoor maps from floor plans. You can do room scans with your phone, or even start from scratch if that's your jam. Best part is that you could do this all with no prior mapping experience. If you haven't already, you can make free indoor maps at mappedin.com and play around with our demos and code samples for free, and then upgrade to Pro for full access to your SDK for your map. One of the big wins with Mappedin is that a single map can serve a ton of use cases. So whether it's public-facing navigation or internal operations, like asset tracking or facility management, it can all be powered by the same core map. This versatility is part of what makes Mappedin and our SDK so powerful. So you build the map once, and you can scale the use cases as your product and company grows. Let's take a quick look at how the Mappedin platform is structured and where the React Native SDK fits in. Firstly, everything starts with a digital foundation. This is where your maps come to life. Using our AI mapping tools and our enterprise-grade platform, you can quickly digitize floor plans and manage your map data efficiently. Layer 2 is where you come in, which is our developer tools. This includes SDKs for web, React, React Native, iOS, and Android. These tools are built to help you create interactive map experiences right inside your own apps. These are the same SDKs that we use internally, and they're built for scalability and flexibility. And then we have our venue experiences, which are our own mapped-in solutions. Whether it's mobile wayfinding, digital directories, operational tools, Mappedin offers these custom and out-of-box solutions that are currently being used across malls, stadiums, airports, and more. Our goal here at Mappedin is to make world-class mapping accessible so that you can build world-class solutions no matter the industry that you're in. So, to give you a sense of scale, Mappedin powers mapping for over 30% of malls worldwide. As you can see, we have 4 billion square feet mapped across the globe. We've guided over 450 million venue visitors in over 57 countries and counting. All right, so let's take a look under the hood of what makes Mappedin, the Mappedin SDK, so powerful and what makes it a solid foundation for mobile apps. At the core is a blend of three powerful technologies optimized to work seamlessly together for mobile-first use cases. We use MapLibre for outdoor maps. It's open source, fast, and gives your app that rich geospatial context around your venue. Layered on top of that is our own Mappedin engine, which is optimized for high-performance indoor mapping. So this handles everything from walls, wayfinding, POIs, floor switching, and the works. Then there's DuckGL, which is a leading data viz framework. It lets you render important data directly on top of your maps, so you can think of heat maps, occupancy data, or foot traffic. This isn't just about indoor wayfinding. The SDK provides a canvas where spatial data meets real-time insights, and you get the tools to build smarter, more responsive apps. So our React Native SDK comes packed with features right out the gate. Think of this as your toolkit for building rich, spatially aware mobile apps. Some highlights include Blue Dot for user real-time positioning, dynamic labels and markers for all those little details, wayfinding that allows for dynamic routing and accounts for accessibility, and even 3D models. As you can see, you can get pretty crazy with it. With the SDK, you have full control over the branding and behavior of your map. Some more feature highlights. So say you're building mobile apps for complex properties like campuses, airports, or hospitals, you know that your users don't just stay in one building. Our SDK supports multi-building maps along with dynamic focus and outdoor paths to seamlessly guide your users between places like parking lots or courtyards. And if you're dealing with flaky connectivity, especially inside large venues, as I'm sure some of us can relate, well, the SDK supports offline mode. You can now build mobile apps that work just as well online as they do offline. They can work just as well online as they do offline, or switch the two. Not to mention, also great for caching and performance gains, especially on mobile where you want fast load times and smooth interactions, no matter the connection. So we all know that on mobile screens or devices, real estate can be tight, and cluttered visuals can really kill the experience. Marker clustering is coming soon to help keep things clean and touch-friendly. Instead of displaying everything all at once, with the help of the SDK, you'll be able to group them dynamically based on zoom level. Alrighty, so now that you've seen what the SDK can do, we can take a step further and actually build something with it. So now I'm going to walk you through on how to set up your environment, install the React Native SDK, and basically go from a blank screen to a working map step by step. I'll do this in a beginner-friendly way so you could see how we can go from coding to the docs to make sure you can find everything you need when you need them. All right, so let's get our terminals and code editor ready. Feel free to follow along and we'll get started. This is our developer portal. You can find it at developer.mappedin.com. If you haven't landed here already, please explore our developer portal. We have a whole bunch of cool use cases and guides. You can get really lost in here, but it's really fun. So go ahead and explore after the webinar. But for today, we're going to do our React Native SDK setup. So in the docs over here, you'll see a bunch of resources as well. We're going to head over to React Native SDK. And we get started into the Getting Started guide. All right, so let's go ahead and jump down to the local development where we're going to be following step by step on how to set up our environment. Actually, before that, here is a list of requirements that we will need for running this. So make sure you review that before we jump in. And let's get started. So I'm going to pull up my terminal over here. And our first line is to create our Expo project. We're going to create a project called My Mappedin app, and we're going to be starting with a blank TypeScript template. So go ahead and copy that, give that a paste. As we do that, I'm going to take a sip of water. And there we have it. Once everything is done, you should see that your project is ready, means you're good to go. Let's go over to our next steps here, where we install our packages for Mappedin SDK for React Native. There's two ways you can do this. You could use it via npm or yarn, but I'll be using npm for today. So let's go ahead and copy that. So I'll go through line by line. First, we are diving into the project that we just made, so my Mappedin app. After that, this line will install our React Native SDK. And lastly, we're going to also install our other dependencies like React, React Native, and React Native Web View. So go ahead and copy that. And there we have it. We've CD'd into my Mappedin app. I'm going to open this up on my code editor so you can see what that looks like. I'm going to put this away for now. Let's have a look. So as you can see in our package.json, we have all the packages that we just downloaded. In our index, we have our standard index. They also gave us a default app.txs file, which we will be replacing. So under here, now we're going to update our app.tsx with basically a boilerplate of how all your projects are going to start. I will just paste this over here and I can walk you through some of the lines here. Cool. So starting at the top, we have map view and use map that is being imported from the React Native SDK. Basically, map view is your component here. This component is responsible for rendering that indoor map and also providing the use map hook with that context that we'll need. So map view is that main component that we're going to be working in. Any other components that you build for your map should be nested inside map view so we can grab that context. In map view, we have some configuration options. First up, we have map data, which is super important to get your map going. It contains a key secret ID. Currently, this key secret ID is for public use that we can use. And I'll show you where to get the keys in different maps that you can use. We also have options here. These options are to help configure your map on load, whether you want to set a certain floor when the map opens, or you want to set a different style sheet, you would do so in this options here. All right, let's take a look at our map setup components. So this is our map setup component. You see that we are using our use map hook that we've imported, and this use map will give us context to our map data in our map view that we will use to interact with our map. In this use effect, we are waiting for map view and map data to be set. And once it's all ready, we'll log out that it's good to go. And we will also be labeling all the spaces on the map by calling map view labels.all. Other things are pretty standard. So this is wrapped around a view, which is your web view. And then it also has some styles in here. This style will allow the map to fill out the screen. Okay, so fun part, let's go ahead and run our project. I'm gonna open up my terminal here and npm run start. So this is what it's going to look like on start. You do have a QR code, which means if you want to develop and see it on your phone, you're able to scan the QR code. And as long as you have Expo Go on your app, it'll open it for you to see how that looks like. For today, I will be using an iOS simulator. And as that's loading, you see now we have rendered the convention map onto our iPad. I'm using an iPad so we can see clearly. So let me show you how to use some touch controls. So first off, you could use your left click to kind of pan around. These are kind of simulating that mobile gesture that you would use. If you click Command, you'll be able to zoom in and also rotate around the map. So you can see those two little dots would be basically the finger taps. And then as well, if you wanted to tilt, you could do Command and Shift, which will allow you to tilt the map. Cool. So these are super handy when testing how your map behaves before pushing it to a real device. All right, so let's bring this map to life a little bit more. Our goal today is to show a navigation experience. So basically, we'll show some wayfinding, a wayfinding path, and then we'll also show some blue dot animation that will follow along that path. So that's pretty cool. Let me just write out what we will be doing today. So firstly, I'm going to just sudo this so one, I can stay on track and you guys can also follow along. The first thing is we are going to change our map to a multi-building map. I want to show you guys how it looks with a multi-building map on the phone, so that'll be cool. Next, we're going to import and use dynamic focus to be able to dynamically see into the buildings. After that, we're going to create a wayfinding path between 2 points, buildings. And lastly, we could simulate a blue dot to traverse the path that we just made. Cool. So first step is to change our map to a multi-building map. So to do that, very easy. We're going to go back to docs really quickly. And in this sidebar here, you'll see demo keys and maps. Click that, and on this page, you will find keys that you can use for free with our SDK on all our samples on our docs. So feel free to do that. Here's your key and secret. And under here, we have a table with all our demo maps and their names. So there's airport, arenas, malls, basically any map that relates to your use case. For today, I will be using the university campus demo because it is a multi-building map. So let me show you how to change the map ID on our map view. So here's our map view. We have our key, secret, and map ID. And I've simply just pasted the same map ID that we have here for the university campus. I've given that a save. And if we do a reload, press R on your keyboard for a hot reload. Oh, let me take off the labels really quickly so that doesn't get too messy. Hmm. And there we have it. So this is our university campus map. You'll see that we have 1, 2, 3.5, 4 buildings, 3 buildings, 4. And right now we are just seeing the exterior of it. There's nothing going on. If you wanted to set a certain floor, you can set like this building to have the floor exposed. So yeah. The next step now is to add the dynamic focus component so we're able to see through the buildings as we pan through the map. So first things first, we are going to import use dynamic focus, which is a hook in the React Native SDK. So we're going to import use dynamic focus in here. Please. There's a comma, of course. Great. So now that we use our dynamic focus, we can also define it into our component like so. Dynamic focus equals use focus. Perfect. So now we've defined it here. And we'll also activate it into this initialize map here. So let me just take a look at our dynamic focus. And you'll notice that this is another way to do it, which would be installing the package. I like to use the hook. So to enable the dynamic focus, we're going to await dynamic focus dot enable. And I'm just going to paste in the autofocus and set focus to true. Basically, autofocus allows the SDK to know which building is most in view and will allow that facade to show, and set floor in focus just sets the floor when the ceiling basically disappears. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like on our app. And as you can see, it still looks like we don't have any buildings, but as we zoom in, you'll see that the dynamic focus is doing its job, and we are now able to see through the buildings, which is pretty cool. Obviously, there are other settings to it, and feel free to look around this to understand how to customize dynamic focus even further. All right, so I'm going to throw my labels back on. And that is dynamic focus. That is our dynamic focus step, super easy. Next step is to create a wayfinding path between 2 points. So between 2 buildings, let's take a look. I think we shall go from campus dining to the gymnasium. That will be ideal. So over here, you can see this is campus dining. And then over here, let's end up at the gymnasium. Maybe after lunch, we want to go work out. So I'm going to create a new component. So let's do that. I'm just going to copy and paste this map setup here. Make it super easy. We're going to delete dynamic focus. We're going to call this wayfinding and delete the body here. And now I'm going to change the initialize map to initialize wayfinding. Cool. Now we shall nest wayfinding into our map view. So again, we can grab that context. Yeah. Okay, so our next step is to collect all our spaces, our space information. So we're going to go to spaces and we are going to get by type spaces. Actually, let me show you the API references here. If you haven't seen it, under our API tab has our API references for all the SDKs in use. There's previous versions down here. Let's go to React Native here. Get by type. So I just want to show you our get by type function, which retrieves all our map elements of a specific type. This includes spaces, floors, doors, and all the list will be available here. You can see there's a lot, but we have spaces here. So let's go ahead and grab all the spaces in the data there. There we are. And now we are going to need a start and end space. So start space and end space. And we're going to do that by filtering through the spaces and finding them by a specific name. So we could do spaces.find, and we'll go through each space and check if the space name is equal to, sorry, my keyboard is a little weird, campus dining. And then we could do the same over here. This also has an any type. This is not really an error, but a TypeScript error. And what's cool about our SDK is that we do have types. So if you really wanted to, you could do Mappedin space. We are going to have to import Mappedin into our imports, but this allows you to have proper typing in your code. So same thing here. We could do Mappedin space, keep things nice and clean and robust. This one shall change to gymnasium. And there we are. So now we have two spaces, one start and one end space. This will find any spaces with these names and assign them to the variables that we have right now. So the next step after that is to get directions. So how do we get the directions between these two spaces? So let's go ahead and find our get directions here. I'm looking for, I think this one here. So as you can see in our get directions, it takes a from spot and a to spot and additional options. Again, this is a target object. And as you can see, there's space in here, but you can also create navigation or create directions from a whole other points. So we're going to go ahead and call it get directions. So first up, let's validate our spaces. So start space and end space are legitimate, or they're not null objects. Then we can define some directions. And under map data, we're going to call get directions. And again, the directions take a to and from. So start space, end space. And actually, let's also log that out so you guys can see what that looks like. Give that a save. There we go. The map is ready. Let's go back to our iPad here and reload. Sometimes Expo Go will tend to do that. If you're familiar with React Native, then that shouldn't be new to you. Cool. So we haven't actually drawn our directions yet, but we can check the directions that we got back from our console log. A really cool trick is to do Command D, where it shows up a bunch of options. We can open the JS debugger to kind of see our console print there. And then you'll be able to see that our directions object is here. If you take a look at it really quickly, you'll see that we have an array of 55 coordinates. That is the nodes that is generated for the pathing between these two destinations. You can also see the departure and the destination. We can expect the space object that we've defined here, and you could tell because this is the space called campus dining. Under the destination, we also have our gymnasium. So now we know that our departure and destination are legit spaces. Other cool things, you can see the distance between the two, and we also have text directions for accessibility if you wanted to display that on your map. Cool. I'm going to close that up now. And let's continue on. So if our directions is valid, then we will use navigation.draw. So I'm going to go back over here and show you some ways to do wayfinding. In our docs here, we could draw our navigation. So once again, map data, get direction, first and second space. And for our directions, we're going to call map view. So quick touch is map data will grab all the map data available on your MVF or your map. Map view is responsible for updating the UI, or basically the view of your map. So that's why we call map view with our navigation.draw. And let's just go ahead and do that. I'm going to copy paste that, make my life a little bit easier. And once we refresh, we should be able to see a path that traverses. And there we have it, folks. You can see that the path animates on map load. At the beginning, there is a little blue man guy as our starting here points, our pathway through here. And at the end, at our destination, you can see a purple flag indicating that. You'll also notice there's two circles over here, and these circles are basically indicators to tell you or tell the user where the entry and exit points are, especially when navigating outside. The path is very interesting here because when you make your map on editor, there's a whole bunch of nodes that get captured. Once you save your map, these nodes are provided from OpenStreetMap that is now into our data here. So we just snap our path into the closest path outdoors, and that's how everything works together seamlessly. All right, so I think that concludes our wayfinding. And last but not least, let's do the cherry on top, which is simulating our blue dot to traverse our path. Great. So this is a great way to show what your app might look like with real-time positioning enabled, even if you haven't integrated with an indoor positioning provider yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me show you things around blue dots. Let's go to the class here. And super easy to do. First step is to enable our blue dots. So let's go ahead and do that. And under directions, I'll just be enabling our blue dot here. Simple as that. You can have other options as well. As you can see, you could change the color, accuracy ring. Everything here is basically customizable, which is very nice. Next up, I also want to add follow mode. So to follow, we're going to call blue dot follow. This takes over the camera and will adjust the camera in view while the blue dot is moving. So we're going to go ahead and paste that in as well. There are a lot of other options that you can always add along, and everything is in the docs. And yeah, last but not least, we are going to let me close my terminal for a second. Last but not least, we're going to traverse through all the paths that we saw. So earlier I showed you the coordinates or the path coordinates that contain all the nodes that we're going to go through. So we're going to update blue dot to do that. So first we're going to make a for loop for each node of directions.path. So that again is the array of paths. And we're going to call map view blue dot update, which will manually update the blue dot positioning. So let me go ahead and do that, give that a save. And we'll need to change some of these fields here. We are going to call our node, the one that we're going through, dot coordinates, dot latitude. Same thing here, node dot coordinates, dot longitude. And the floor ID, once again, same thing, node coordinates, dot floor ID. Last but not least, because we don't want it to be running through our path, we want to make it look like it's walking. So I'm just going to add a 1-second timer here with a set timeout of 1 second. Amazing. That looks good so far. Nothing crazy on our terminal. Let's go ahead and refresh and hopefully see the final product. Oh, and there we are. As you can see, we have our little blue dot traversing the path. You'll also notice how the camera moves as the blue dot is moving. It is moving through each node every second. And voila. I'll wait for the whole thing to end because it is kind of exciting. I think one thing to note, if you were to adjust the camera, then it doesn't follow anymore, but usually on the phone, no one's going to do that. Get through the little door here. And there we have it. Amazing. All right, so that concludes our live demo for today. Let me show you some other cool things. You could find these samples on our React Native repo, but let me show you a few examples that our SDK team has provided us. First up, let me clear my console here. And then let me run this. Amazing. So again, you guys have access to these examples in the React Native, on the React Native page. But I'll go through some of these with you. I'd like to do a quick shout out to Yushi Wang for making these amazing examples on the SDK team. So first, let me go through, oh, actually, let me change the screen so we have a better view here. Here we are. Hopefully that's a little bit more clear for you guys. Let's go through some examples with interactivity to start. So as you can see, we are rendering, this is our demo mall map. And it uses things like click events to show certain things. So for example, if I were to click on this polygon here, you'll see that the polygon location has highlighted red. We have a marker to indicate that space name. And if I click another one here, you'll also notice that the camera focuses and centers that location onto the map, which is pretty cool. And shows how you could do things very dynamically or have that user interaction for your users. Let's go ahead and take a look at markers. So I'm going to zoom once again. You'll notice over here for the markers, this is a dynamic marker that changes every so often. We also have markers where you click. So this is Urban Planet, but this is going to show some moving markers. This is how you reposition certain things on your mouse click, which is pretty cool. Markers and labels are a great way to add details to your map that is not there on the start. And let's do one more example, which is 3D models. So as I mentioned before, you can add 3D models onto the map, which is super fun. On this example here, you'll see a bunch of rubber ducks. And if you were to click a rubber duck, you'll notice that it expands and grows on the map. If you click another one, the other one shrinks and they're taking turns being the big duck. All right, let me just go back really quick. So like I mentioned, make sure you check out our showcase, guys. Shows a bunch of demos and applications that have been built by us and our team. If you click into one, it'll link out to guides that are relevant. This, for example, is the multi-lease demo, which showcases our multi-view here. Really cool is that you can view the code. All the code that we put in our showcase is available. So you don't have to start from scratch. You can start from where we are as a jumping pad and build on top of that. Everything that you need is here. We don't hide anything. And yeah, I think that pretty much sums it. I'm going to pull back our slides onto our we'll pull up some slides. Actually, last but not least, if you guys have more questions after the webinar or while you're working on your stuff, me and my team are always available at our community forum at community.mappedin.com. Feel free to show off what you're working on, ask us some questions, give us some feedback, and we'll be happy to help. All right, so that's the developer community. And here we are at the end. Thanks again for spending time with us. As you can see, we have a lot of resources to help you take that next step. And of course, if you want to talk to us directly, you can contact us at our email down below. And now I shall pass things off to my colleague Mark to answer any questions that have trickled in.
Thanks, Kim. So there's been one question I'll just review that came in during the webcast that I typed a reply to, but it was a question about how we would integrate with Bluetooth beacons. So typically when you're using beacons, the beacon provider gives you an SDK that will provide the latitude, longitude, the floor elevation or coordinates of where that particular user is. So our SDK is a consumer of coordinates. So as Kim showed in her demo, you can provide it that latitude and longitude position as well as the floor, and it's going to draw the blue dot at the specific location of where that is. So our SDK doesn't really care where those coordinates come from, whether it's a third-party SDK or if you're using the device APIs, we can pick them up from there automatically. It will be able to use those to draw the blue dot and help the user navigate around the map. Another one question we had was around camera control. So asking if there's a way to control which types of interactions the user can do. So maybe you just want to allow them to pan but not tilt or rotate if you possibly want to lock down to a straight vertical view looking straight down on the map. That is possible. So there's a camera.interactivity property, and you can set which camera properties are enabled or disabled. So you can turn off those four different types of movement. So the pan, tilt, zoom, and rotation can be controlled that way. Another one was asking about the three models that were used. So in the very final example there with the duck, that's just a model that's included in that example. Earlier on, Kim did have a demo right there of a whole bunch of items on there. So these are part of a mapped-in library. So we have a 3D object library of common objects that you can add to the map. It's free to use. You can include it and add it in. We also have support for any GLB or GLTF file. So if you have your own 3D objects that you want to use in your app, you can add those models directly to your map as well. So getting caught up with those yet. If anyone does have any questions, just use the little Q&A panel down at the bottom there, and you can type in questions. So we'll kind of ramble on for a couple minutes here, give you guys time to ask a question. So, okay, we've got one that came in here. Just give me a second to read. Thinking of placing, yes. So thinking of placing these at specific points for navigation. These, if you're referring to 3D models, you can place them at any position on the map. So they get added to a lat and long coordinate. So you can have them appear anywhere and on different floors or levels. So that's completely up to you. We also have labels and markers that you can add to different positions on the map. They're similar but slightly different. So labels allow you to add some text to the map, and they have an icon as well. You can style the text and have different SVG icons on there. So it's kind of a quick and easy way to add text information to the map. We also have support for markers. And markers allow you to basically add some HTML on top of the map. So if you want to just display text, you could do that, although it's a bit easier to do with the label, but it gives you a bit more of a rich experience. So this is what Kim's showing here, some images with some nice borders and things. So essentially whatever you can do with HTML and CSS, you can even have some forms and take input through markers and collect information from the user that way. All right, another one. Is it possible to display location category icons instead of slash next to the label on the map? So labels, as I mentioned, have text and an SVG icon. And that's kind of the simple way to label, or you can add a marker and you can fully style what you want. So, and if you do add category icons or icons to your map as well, like icons to a location, you'll be able to pull those down. So you can get location information from the map. There's some metadata like description, opening, closing hours. There's social media links you can add to your map. And if you do add icons to your map in that way, then they'd be able to get those icons that you uploaded to the map editor. So just reading through, we got a few questions coming in, so keep them going.
Amazing.
So a question about having different maps when clicked on would start you from specific points. That's definitely possible. So you could uh, set up something similar to how our mapped-in viewer works. So we have a couple products that can use to display the map. So we were talking SDKs here, but we've used these same SDKs to make products that people can use. So one of them is mapped-in viewer, the other is mapped-in web, just kind of a more advanced version of viewer. And these have a number of URL parameters, so you can predefine things like path, directions, where the camera is going to go using different URL parameters, and this can allow you to pre-populate paths and directions and things on the map. So if you're using our viewer or our applications, that's definitely possible. If you want to do that yourself, you could definitely add your own query parameters that start the user at specific points. That's a quite common use case for people may have like little posters or signs with QR codes that say, you're here, or click this to get directions from here to the cafeteria or wherever people might be going. And then they'd be able to open the map and have that route predefined. Another one, will React Native SDK have long-term support? Asking to use it in production long-term. Yes, absolutely will. So Kim mentioned this is an earlier alpha release of our version 6 SDK. So we've had a number of versions and it's been out for many years now. So this is our kind of latest and greatest. We do have version 5 that's been out for many years. That's essentially, that's our version that's not in the beta state. But we'd recommend everyone to take a look at version 6. It's been essentially a rewrite from the ground up, much more performant, many more features, much more efficient, looks much better than some of our earlier ones. So I'd recommend to take a look at that, even though we're still in that sort of alpha beta phase, but it won't be too long for this to get into a V6 release quality. Okay, so I think I've gone through the questions.
I think I just want to add one thing.
Go ahead.
I think that was to Barry's ask about navigation options. I just want to bring in, so when you're drawing navigations, you can also have options that you add in. And this is where you can do a lot of customization. You could do different marker options. You can create markers on your connection or your departure and destination and adjust it like so. And then you also have customizations for your paths. So you can change the colors, change the width size. You can even have animations on the path. So I'm just adding a little more context there.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.
Cool.
All right. So I think we're getting close to time here. We've gone through all of our questions, so can wrap it up. Thanks everyone for attending here today. And again, come by our developer forum if there's any follow-up questions that you might have, or if you have any questions while you're trying out any of our tools or APIs and SDKs, we'll be here to help.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Bye.